Hi all, it's me again. Sorry I haven't been uploading as much because I've been very busy and I wanted to save my voice. So I'm going to continue reading from my book, Secret Lives of the First Ladies. Let's go! I don't know why I said it like that. Animal House. When men ran for president in the late 19th century, it was customary for them to conduct what is called a front porch campaign. That meant that they stayed at home, received crowds there, giving speeches and press statements whenever enough people showed up. Benjamin Harrison's 1888 front porch campaign hit his wife like a train. Droves of curious voters visited their Indianapolis home, turning into a wreck. Furniture was broken, the fence around the property was busted apart, and the home's carpeting was worn straight through to the floor. Carrie, a stickler for hostessing details, did her best to feed as many guests as she could, all while watching her beloved homestead fall apart. Though it nearly did her in, her response was characteristically humorous. Looking at the damage that surrounded her, she could look either the White House or the poorhouse with us now. Shock to the system. Carrie Harris's desire to overhaul the White House was shared by plenty of other people in Washington. The sorry fact was that by the beginning of the Harrison administration, the old landmark was in dire need of care and modernization. In fact, the idea of relocating the presidential living space to another Washington building altogether was bandied about seriously for months. The First Lady did most with the funds given her by Congress, installing, among other things, a switchboard to accommodate more than one phone and the first White House electric lights. The lights, however, were a rather newfangled sort of thing, and frankly put the fear of God into the First Lady, into the First Family. When White House usher like Hoover failed to turn them off at night himself, they tended to remain on all night. Neither Carrie, the president, nor any member of the large family trusted the system enough to touch the light switch themselves, convinced that they'd get a fatal jolt by doing so. Daughter of the Revolution, Carrie Harrison played an active role in decorating her surroundings, and she was the first lady to bring a Christmas tree into the White House. But she also participated in another first, and one that was considerably more important. She was the first presidential spouse to deliver a speech in public that she herself had written. Though there was already a Sons of the American Revolution, the organization excluded females from joining, which naturally inspired the Daughters of the American Revolution, a patriotic group that sought to celebrate and emulate the inspiring actions of the women who've been a part of the nation's founding generation. Carrie Harrison was the group's first president general and didn't mince words in her first speech. Since this society has been organized and so much thought and reading directed to the early struggles of this country, the First Lady proclaimed, it has made plain that much of its success was due to women of the era. I feel sure that their daughters can perpetuate a society worthy of the cause and worthy themselves. You go, girl. Really, you go. Oh my God, I love her. Presidential painter. Caroline Harris's first love may in fact have been art. And the reason why I was looking so hard at the camera was because I accidentally cut myself while saving here. And I just want to see if you guys could see. Let me know if you guys could. If you guys can. Comment down below if you can or not, okay? Because through my viewing, I can, but everyone's point of view is different, okay? I wasn't trying to be creepy or anything, I just was worried. Okay, I'm going to continue. On campus and on Portsmouth, long before reaching the White House, and even had a kiln of her own to finish the tray on which she would work. The duties of First Lady didn't stop her, and she continued to indulge her tastes. Having moved into a mansion in which history leaped at her from every corner, Carrie felt inspired to go through the building's closets. There she found pieces of china and other tableware that had been collected by her predecessors, and she arranged for the display in the White House in the cabinet she had especially built for the purpose. Though flowers, particularly orchids, became something of an obsession as she reorganized the greenhouse and filled the mansion with plants, it was her original artwork that made a sensation. Carey designed lined china for the Harrison administration, which featured the nation's arms on which guests could have their food served at functions. It even produced souvenir china for tourists with her own characteristic symbol, a shamrock. But perhaps her most enduring piece was created for none other than her own grandson, Benjamin McKee. For him, she decorated a porcelain bathtub with gorgeous magnolia blossoms. Oh, I'll call him back later. I'm kind of busy. Throwing rice at Uncle Ben. Some 4 years after Carey's death, Benjamin Harrison took another bride. His late wife's niece, Mary Scott Lord Dimmick. I think that's how you say the last name. I'm not sure. Mary had been indispensable to Carey in the White House, helping out with hostessing and secretarial duties. But Harris's children, Russell and Mary, were thunderstruck by their father's choice and refused to attend the wedding. It was a rift that never healed, and the former president eventually had the tooth taken out of his well. All the president's wives. Mary Harrison, 1858 through 1858 through 1948. Blah. I've been reading so much of the 1800s that I forgot that there was such a thing as the 1900s. Oops. Though she had never been a first lady, Benjamin Harrison's second wife was no stranger to the White House. To begin with, Mary and Benjamin were already family when they decided to tie the knot. She was the niece of Harrison's former wife, Caroline, and had served as secretary during her aunt's years as First Lady. 4 years after Caroline's death, former President Harrison decided to transform Mary from a niece by marriage to his wife. Harrison's children were disgusted by the notion that their first cousin had suddenly become their stepmother, and scared off by the prospect of intolerability toward awkward Thanksgiving dinners, remained irrevocably estranged from their father and his younger brother. After Harrison died in 1901, Mary found herself in a strange position of being a presidential widow who had never been First Lady. Her situation proved a bit too thorny for members of Congress. In 1909, they voted against the bill that would have awarded her the sort of pension payment given to other presidential widows. Yikes. Yikes. I mean, that's what you get for marrying into incest. I can't believe that was a thing back then, for marrying into incest. But, I mean, I guess it was a thing. Anyways, let's continue. Chapter 20. Ida Saxton McKinley, June 8, 1847 through May 26, 1907. Married January 25, 1871. Presidential husband, William McKinley. Children, Catherine and Ida. First Lady, 1897 through 1901. Astrological sign, Gemini. Religion, Presbyterian. Seven. Oh, Major, they will kill you, they will kill you. To her husband after his presidential victory. Confined to bed rest for most of her husband's presidency, Ida McKinley passed the time by crocheting some 3,500 pairs of slippers. Wow. At William McKinley's inaugural ball in 1897, his wife Ida made a memorable entrance. Resplendent in a gown of white satin, the new First Lady appeared before the admiring crowd, and probably passed out cold. To the befuddlement of the party's guests, the president picked her up, made an exit with little fanfare and no explanation, and took her home. Few people at the ball could have known it at the time, but McKinley's nonchalance was more than just a means of coping with an embarrassing situation. Such calm had long since become a habit. Indeed, Ida's spell hardly came as a surprise to him that evening, for Ida McKinley was a spectacularly sick woman. It hadn't always been that way. When the future president began courting her in 1870, he considered himself the luckiest fellow in Canton, Ohio. Ida was the envy of almost every young woman, brilliant, beautiful, and full of infectious energy. Her father, James Asbury Saxton, was rich. Ida had gone to the finest schools, had been to Europe, and had even acquired real business experience as an employee in her father's bank. Canton society was her oyster, and she had the pick of the litter when it came to suitors. She picked attorney William McKinley, who impressed everyone, including, conveniently, Ida's father. With his service in the Civil War, his ambition, and his recent election as county prosecutor. At the time and not in a service that included two ministers, Ida was a Presbyterian while William was a Methodist. The couple moved into a house that had been given to them by Ida's father and settled into a married life that can truly be called blissful. They soon had a little daughter, Katie, who became the hub around which Mrs. McKinley's life revolved, and William earned a good living with his practice. Then, just 2 years into the marriage, everything went to hell in a hay bale for Ida. Shortly after suffering the death of her beloved mother, Kate Saxton, she gave birth to another daughter in a delivery that was long, difficult, and exceptionally painful. Worse, Ida seemed incapable of recovering from the event and became chained to her bed, complaining constantly of headaches, weakness, stomach troubles, and an assortment of the ill. The new child, fittingly named Ida, was any better off than her mother. Frail and sickly, the baby died in August of 1873, less than 5 months after she was born. As the horrors of 1873 were hard on Ida, they soon became a veritable curse to her surviving daughter. Mrs. McKinley became protected to a fault with little Kitty, smothering her with paranoia and instilling in her a sense of God-fearing doom that was entirely unnatural for a young child. Tragically, none of this helped. Kitty was taken by typhoid fever in 1875. Again, damn! That sucks hard. This, for all intents and purposes, brought about the end of the Ida Saxton whom William McKinley had originally married. The death of Kitty turned Ida into a different person. And it wasn't a change for the better. Gone was the vivacious belle who has set Canton society ablaze with her blue eyes and laughter. The doppelganger who took her place was a convulsively ill, self-centered shell who seemed to age years with every moment. Wow. She just couldn't live without her babies. She wanted her daughters back, I guess. And just what was the nature of her afflictions? Ida complained of everything from dizzy, migraine, to severe digestive problems. While historians have managed to diagnose phobias, cancer, and nearly everything in between. And the most popular theory is that Ida McKinley suffered from the following sickness, otherwise known as epilepsy. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not a damn doctor. This thing, however, doctors could do little for her beyond sedation, using narcotics to put her in a state of semi-consciousness. They made her look like the undead, and her husband, bound to his decaying wife by some blind sense of duty, became in fashion her slave. From 1876, while serving several terms in the United States House of Representatives, William continued to grow as a force in the Republican Party, even as he made a daily, indeed sometimes hourly, habit of looking at his wife's needs. Though he had secured the aid of a nurse, McKinley felt obliged to indulge Ida's every whim. If she felt neglected at reception, he took time away from political talk to be with her. If she needed more thread for her needlework while he busied himself with government work, he got up to fetch some for her. And if he returned from running errands after being gone a little longer than he anticipated, he comforted her while she wept in frustration. Heck, he even let her win at cards. Damn. Ida State seemed to get better after 1891 when William became governor of Ohio. She had always been headstrong, even in the before time that precedes the death of her daughters. Now she relied on that quality to rise to the occasion, or at least try. Conscious of her condition and its toll on her husband, Ida went through a school doctor in search of a cure and maintained her enthusiasm for William's success, whatever it might mean for their time together. But people were beginning to catch on to her vulnerability and erratic, needy behavior. and the Republicans, keen on getting William into the White House, wondered if his wife was really up to it. Though it was widely believed by doctors and those close to Ida that she probably suffered from epilepsy, the word itself was never ever uttered to outsiders. Such was the alarm that the following sickness inspired at the time, and it may have played a role in concealing the truth about Mrs. McKinley during the 1896 presidential campaign. But another more important factor helped William during the contest. His heroic devotion to Ida was universally seen as a touching and admirable quality in a would-be president. Countless people had seen how close the couple was and how McKinley made a habit of taking time out from his professional cares to see his beloved Ida. The bond got them both through a difficult presidency that witnessed the Spanish-American War. William continued to play his dual role as politician/caretaker, a double burden that got only heavier as the First Lady's condition worsened. Seizures, headaches, and even terrible menstrual cycles all grew in frequency and severity for Ida. The president endured the pressure even when it took him to the brink of a nervous breakdown. He once collapsed into tears after admitting to a friend that his wife's condition and the mounting pressure for war with Spain were more than he could handle. Ida, for better or worse, insisted on playing the role of First Lady as often as possible. Though much of her time was taken with crocheting, blackouts, and the ingestion of barbiturates, she openly spoke out against the president's critics, offering him plenty of advice on everything from the cabinet to the Philippines, and insisted on taking her place in receiving lines. Even that meant greeting guests with a blank stare from a stuffed chick. Stubborn as ever, she simply refused to let another female family member take over White House hostessing. Changes to protocol were made to accommodate her. For instance, the president insisted on having Ida sit next to him at dinner parties, whereas previous first ladies were expected to sit themselves opposite their husband. It caused some trouble with pedants, but McKinley would not be moved on the subject. Despite all the worries, the president did his job well enough to win re-election in the first year of the new century. Right on cue, Ida's health shaped the beginning of her husband's second term. While the first couple was making a cross-country trip in 1901, an infection in Ida's finger spread to the rest of her body. Soon she was closer to death than she'd ever been, and William postponed a trip they were supposed to make to Buffalo. After she made a surprising recovery, the Buffalo excursion went ahead for September 5th, scheduled to coincide with the city's Pan-American Exposition. There on September 6th, an anarchist named Leon Zukoi, I think how you say his last name, I don't know, shot McKinley, dealing him a wound that would take his life 8 days later. The president, more than anyone, understood immediately what was at stake should he die. "My wife, be careful how you tell her," he gasped to his secretary while bleeding on the ground. "Oh, be careful!" To everyone's astonishment, McKinley's concern seemed strangely unfounded. Ida sat by her dying husband during his final week, comforting him tenderly and suffering nearly a breakdown throughout. His death deprived her of the living crutch that had supported her for nearly 30 years, producing her an emptiness that fell away only with her death less than 6 years later in Ohio. The Punisher. Ida took the death of her sickly daughter in 1873 as a sign from God, a punitive act that was meant to remind her of her motherly father. Thus stricken, she brooded over the welfare of her main daughter, Katie, with Old Testament dread. The impressionable little Katie took her mother's morbid protectiveness very seriously. Once when asked if she wanted to go for a walk with her uncle, Katie responded, "My excuse will make any child psychologist. No, you mustn't go out of the yard," she was saying, "or God will punish Mama some more." Please comment, rate, and subscribe down below. And if you're on YouTube, please ring that bell notification so you can know when I upload. And if you're on TikTok, please like and follow my videos. And please pay for something on either my eBay and or Mercari, okay? Well, bye!